Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. We're here for, once again, press conference. Once again, we're here with our wall of shame. This is Operation Sent Us a Naughty List. You know, it's a news flash that we did another undercover operation. Ironically, the only people that don't seem to get it in the entire county are these folks. A few weeks ago, I was at dinner with my son, and he said, "Well, Dad, it's about time for you to round up another 100 or so, isn't it?" And I said, "What makes you say that?" He says, "Duh, you do it every November and December, and sometimes May and June." So, I mean, everybody gets it except these folks, and they went out of their way in order to go to the county jail this last weekend. I want to introduce to you the folks that are with us today, and I want to start with our chiefs of police, who, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see an example of the most professional law enforcement executives any place in the nation, you can look here because it's these chiefs. We have Chief Ruben Garcia from Lakeland, Chief Jim Alinsky from Haines City, Chief Andy Ray from Auburndale. We have Director Charlie Bird from Winter Haven. We have Chief Joe Hall from Bartow, and certainly they all work together with us at the Sheriff's Office. They sent their law enforcement officers, their police officers, to work with my deputies and their detectives to work with our detectives. And at the end of the day, this operation wouldn't be possible without the hard work and the dedication and the support of the State Attorney's Office. Brian Haas, who's our state attorney, is not with us today, but Brad Copley, who is the special prosecutor, is, as well as Nicole Orr, who's the director of intake, and will be dealing with the overwhelming majority of these cases. But I think most importantly today are the counselors that once again have agreed to join us. We had 4 different anti-human trafficking groups that were with us this time. The 2 young ladies that are with us today, Krista Lynn and Mary Ann Thomas, they both are with One More Child. And you'll hear from Krista in just a few minutes, but I can tell you unequivocally that they make this operation complete, because from the moment we take these folks into custody, our potential victims of human trafficking are immediately offered services to protect them and to help them break this horrible chain that they're involved in. Also, the Children Advocacy Center worked with us, and Celia Freedom worked with us, as well as Heartland for Children. But the primary purpose of this operation, as the past operations, are to identify and rescue the victims of human trafficking. In addition to that, the other co-primary purpose is to find deviants that want to prey on our children, that want to attack our children, that stalk our children online. And when you look at the 7 that are listed in the center there, the child sexual predators, understand that 5 of them traveled, 2 of them only used the computer. We'll tell you a little bit more about them in just a second, but 5 of those folks came to an undercover home thinking they were going to engage a child in sex. I can tell you our detectives saved lives because it wasn't a real child, it was a detective pretending to be a very young child. But they thought they were showing up to sexually batter, to rape a child. This operation was short in duration. It started on December the 3rd and wrapped up on December the 8th. Our detectives cast a wide net out upon the ocean, and what we brought in was child predators, deviants, victims of human trafficking, and Johns. Now I want to talk about the Johns for just a second, and then you're going to see some snapshots. If these guys didn't do what they did, these ladies here, fortunately, would be out of business. But this group to the left enable, create the environment that our victims of human trafficking work in? Are they all cognizant that these young ladies are victims? No, most of them are in total denial. But the reality is it's them, their conduct, their funds that feed the entire process, and we're going to talk about them. 124 arrests in just that short period of time of less than a week. 53 of them were prostitutes or victims of human trafficking. 46 were Johns. 17 were transporting or deriving proceeds. They will be further investigated for the possibility that they were the human trafficker of these ladies. We talked about the 7 predators, and there was one other that got scooped up in the process. I said before, and I underscore once again, and you'll hear Krista say this, we did something different here that many agencies across this state and nation don't do. We embed the counselors with us, and they work long hours so that we can immediately offer services. And here's what we found. We found 2 young ladies that showed up that never ever had a criminal arrest. And they still didn't go to the county jail because they immediately agreed to accept services and were placed in those services, and Krista will tell you more. 5 others, we have a real strong possibility that they are currently victims of human trafficking. So when you figure that we identified 7 in this one operation, that's more than we were able to focus on in any other single operation. And we've grayed out their face here. What's interesting to understand that I in my heart believe that every one of these prostitutes at some point in time in their life were a victim of human trafficking, if in fact they're not currently a victim of human trafficking. The laws of the state of Florida are beautiful. If they accept services, they go through the process, we wipe out all reports, all photographs, all data that indicates that they were ever taken into custody so that they can continue to live as victims, which they really are, with services and not as suspects of violating the law. So I always have the naysayers, I call them the haters or the uninformed, that tell us things like, oh, it's just a business relationship between 2 consenting adults. No, it's not. The John may be consenting. These ladies are or have been victims, but it's not a low-level nonviolent event. For example, in this operation, we filed 78 new felony charges, and we filed 148 misdemeanor charges. But if you listen to the loud few people who don't know what they're talking about, you would think these were all angels that just got caught up in something that didn't mean to happen. But listen to this. This group of people here had 443 previous felony charges, 571 previous misdemeanor charges, and of those charges, 51 were violent felonies or violent crimes. So at the end of the day, if you think we just happened to drive by a monastery and pick up a bunch of innocent folks, you're wrong. That's not what happened here. 30, count them, 30 of these folks were married. That's right. Do you reckon, and that's Polk County vernacular, do you think, if you're not from Polk County, that maybe their wife's the victim? That they are going to go home exposed to hepatitis, HIV, and infect their wives? 65% of the Johns were married. Wives, are you paying attention? Watch out, because I can tell you that they may say, "Oh, it's the first time, honey. I didn't mean it. I'll love you in the morning. It was a slip." You might want to go to the doctor and get tested, because it's probably not the first time they've done things they shouldn't. 18 of them are on government assistance, and that always fires me up. I don't mind paying my taxes. I certainly think government assistance is not just mandatory, but is an absolute certain requirement of a society to take care of the very young, the very old, the physically and mentally challenged, those who just can't function. But if you're well enough to go out and do this, you ought to be well enough to go out and work and not take government assistance. 2 of these victims or suspects brought their very young children to the operation. Did you hear me? They brought their babies with them. A 3-year-old and I think a 5-year-old on one occasion. They brought their little children while they turned tricks. They brought narcotics. They brought a firearm. One of the ladies who showed up had a baby 10 days ago. 10 days ago, and she was already back at work. One was pregnant. So I'm going to go through some flashcards, as you're used to, and I'm going to start with folks who are the worst of the worst of the worst, and that's these deviant child sexual predators. This guy didn't travel, but he communicated over the internet to what he thought was a 13-year-old female, and he was preparing to travel. He's retired. His name's William Stimmerman. He said he was fixed, so don't worry, you can't get pregnant. He was married. That's right, the guy's married. He told this little 13-year-old, and he thought he was conversing with the 13-year-old, wear something sexy and easy to get out of. Did you hear me? That's the communication he was having with a child. You think there's a problem here? We do. Of course, then there's always Matthew Minardi. He's a waiter. He lives in Palm Harbor. 13-year-old female is who he was communicating with, he thought. He sent nude photographs of himself. And he said that I was just stupid when our colleagues from Pinellas County went to arrest him, and he confessed. He also used a computer. He wanted to set up an environment where he and another adult could come have sex with a child. That's what he fantasized about online. Everyone else I'm going to talk about traveled. They showed up. That's right. They showed up at the undercover house, knocked on the front door, thinking they were about to engage a child in sex. How about Benjamin Castaneda? He's from Orlando. He works as a waiter at Simpson's Restaurant at Universal Studios. He's got a bachelor's degree in journalism. He sent nude photos of himself. I guess when he's sitting down in lockup, since he's got a bachelor's degree in journalism, he can, like, prepare his own press release so that he can share with everyone that a journalism degree will help you write better after you're arrested if you want to tell your story about why you travel to have sex with a 13-year-old child. And then there's Demetrius Gonzalez. He's from Davenport. He's a dental assistant. He thought he was going to meet up with and have sex with a 14-year-old boy. He brought, and I'll clean this up so we can use it on television, equipment with him to use on the boy. He said he likes to think of it as a pool. You see, he normally stays down in the adult end of the pool, but occasionally he goes to the kiddie end of the pool. Did you hear me? So he likes to go to the kiddie end of the pool. Now that's not all. This guy's got a real screw loose someplace. He said in the past he was a counselor for a children's camp called Integrity in Burlingame, New York. Demetrius Gonzalez. That's just who you want around your children at a child's camp. Then there's Pierre Alvarez. He's from Davenport. He's unemployed. He lives with his parents. He rode his bike to the undercover location to have sex with what he thought was a 13-year-old girl. He sent photographs online of himself nude. He talked ugly things about sex. And he is now locked up in the county jail. Anthony Gavin, you know, we had a culture change for Anthony. He had a news flash. He's a server at a restaurant. He traveled to meet a 14-year-old boy. He's married. I know his wife's proud. But he said, quote, "I don't want to be labeled a pedophile." Well, if you don't want to be labeled a pedophile, why are you showing up to have sex with a 14-year-old boy? Scary, scary thing. And of course, then there's Joshua Bryant. Joshua Bryant's from Brandon, Florida. He works at a convenience store. He came to meet a 14-year-old boy. He lives with his grandmother. He said he's attracted to 13 and 14-year-old boys, and here's his fantasy. He wants to keep them at his house. He wants them to stay in his room. He said, "I'll hide you." He said, "You know, when your family reports you missing tomorrow, I'll have you hidden in my room." That gives me pause. He didn't go so far as to say he would shackle him or imprison him, but he made it abundantly clear that he would hide this 13, 14-year-old little boy from his parents when they reported him as missing. He is dangerous, folks. This is his fantasy. This is what he was sharing. This is what he thought he was communicating to this 14-year-old boy. He was preparing this child to be hidden away in his home. It's only a small step from a fantasy to reality. That's our child predators. Now I'm going to introduce you to just a snapshot of what I think are interesting Johns that showed up. And how could you have an undercover operation without a pastor? There you go. Robert Johns. He's a pastor at New Horizons Church in Haines City. He lives in Mulberry. He also works at a local insurance company, and he solicited sex. He confessed to us. He stated, "Well, it just came over my cell phone all by itself." Well, that's interesting. We all have cell phones. Do y'all just like get ladies or prostitutes, you know, that search you up? Well, not only is he a pastor, not only did he solicit sex, but I think he kind of BS'd us a little bit too. Fibbed to us. Thou shalt not lie or something, but he did. I don't know what you say about that other than Jesus ain't going to be happy. Rodney Davis, 56, from Winter Garden. He's a Disney security guard. He's married, been married 27 years. We charged him with soliciting. He brought him a Viagra pill, but he didn't have a prescription for it, so that's another criminal charge. Have Viagra, will travel? Okay, here's what you're not going to believe. Maybe you're not going to believe any of it. It's hard to believe any of this. I mean, people who live in what I call the normal world, this guy walked up to the front door of this home in a neighborhood on a cool evening, buck naked. Now, if you don't know the difference in naked and buck naked means you're not even wearing your socks. He didn't have a stitch of clothes on, but he was carrying a shirt, I guess in case of an emergency. He walked into the house. He was proud of himself. That's up for debate. But the detectives promptly took him into custody and gave him some breeches to put on. Then there's 44-year-old Tommy Gainey. Tommy Gainey is a professional golfer. In fact, he's got his PGA card. He's from Hartsville, South Carolina. He's married. He told us that he was here for a charity golf event, and it was to be like the next morning tee-off. He didn't make it. He was a scratch. Now, we Googled around to see if he was telling us the truth, and if you Google or search out and just type in 2 gloves, it comes up with his name. So he's been on the tour for quite a while. There's so many things I could say about that with 2 gloves, but I won't, because my director of communications said it'll go downhill fast if you do. We charged him with soliciting. He missed his tea time the next morning. And of course, what's an undercover operation without a youth sports coach? From Orlando, lives in Windermere. He is a youth soccer coach, and he was charged with soliciting as well. His name's Kirkland Millette. And then you got old William Earl Stocks. He's 57. He's from Tallahassee. He is a manager at Woodman's of the World Insurance, and he was in the Orlando area to present American flags to children at the Snowball Express event at one of the Disney hotels. He didn't make it. I don't know what happened to the flags, but he didn't have them when he arrived at the prostitution sting. He's been married 30-plus years. He's a retired lieutenant in the North Carolina National Guard, and he became a new patron of the county jail. Then there's Clint Bagdon from Winter Garden. He's in IT sales for a Fortune 500 company. He arrived driving his Porsche. He left his wife at the Mount Dora Christmas parade. He said he had to go get a haircut. They told me not to say any more. But we don't normally give haircuts at the county jail, except, like once a month on Friday. If he hangs around in the jail long enough, we'll get him his haircut. But I just imagine he may not need a haircut after his wife skins him. He was supposed to get on a plane the next morning. He missed his plane, but if he didn't bond out, he had an opportunity for first appearance. Then there's Bavik Ramba. He's from Orlando. He owns the Super 8 in Old Town in Kissimmee. We charged him with soliciting. He's married. And he made the statement, which is true: I worked so hard to keep prostitution out of my hotel. I worked so hard, yet I'm here at a prostitution operation. And the truth is, the local hotels in this area are very proactive working with us because they don't want to add to the misery of the victims of human trafficking, nor do they want the prostitution activity. But yet he shows up at one of those operations he tries to keep away. I'm going to ask the chiefs that want to speak, and then Krista is going to wrap it up with Marianne, and then we'll take questions. So, chiefs?
Well, as you can see, we've had another successful event, though it's not something to be proud of, but collaboration is the key here. We will continue to work with the sheriff and his team to get rid of sexual deviants from our county, no matter what city they're in. So we look forward to the next one.
We're not just up here just because it's a press conference and it was a successful operation. This county works strongly together. Chief mentioned collaboration, and I just want to reinforce that will continue. And we're up here, we work very, very well together. We will continue to work very well together. And that should be a message, again, to people that we're going to get you if you come to Polk County, and we're going to hold you accountable.
Good morning, everyone. Joe Hall, Bartow Police Department. I personally want to thank these two ladies for being a part of this. And I, too, want to say, well, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think this is a great testament to how all of the agencies in Polk County come together to bring such an operation to a successful conclusion. I want to thank the sheriff and all the members of the Polk County Sheriff's Office, and I also want to thank the members of the Bartow Police Department that participated in the program.
Good morning, Andy Ray, Auburndale Police Department. I'd just like to thank the sheriff and his staff, and also the members of the sheriff's office for including us in the operation. It gives our detectives and our officers an opportunity to work in an organized, significant undercover operation. Gives them some experience that they haven't had, and exposes them to some things that they might not otherwise be exposed to. So it's beneficial to us from an experience and an education standpoint. But it's also a great opportunity for us to be a player in this important activity, and that is to lock up people who are preying on unsuspecting victims, and to protect our children. It's important to us as well, and we're just glad to be a part of the team. Thank you.
Good morning, Ruben Garcia, Lakeland Police Department. I asked myself, when was this operation a success? When they caught that first predator, that's when it was a success. All the rest of it was good, but actually we could have spent all this resource, all this time to catch just that one person, because there's no telling how far that web goes of his victims. So if you wonder when it was a success, it was when they put the handcuffs on that very first predator from this operation. I want to thank the detectives that spent all those evenings out catching those guys. You'll never see them by their very nature of being undercover, but we owe them a debt of gratitude as well. And we certainly wish to continue the partnership that we have with the Sheriff's Office and all the police departments here in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Krista Lynn, One More Child Anti-Trafficking Executive Director, and I just, again, am immensely personally grateful for this sting. At One More Child, everything we do is about helping the lives of children and families, and each of those children who came, each child in our community deserves to live a trauma-free life. And when the Johns are coming here, they're not just buying sex. They're benefiting off of often our childhood suffering, and at the very least our current suffering as women and survivors of exploitation. Without stings like this, the cycle would continue. When I think about our anti-trafficking team at One More Child and the work they do each day out on the streets, knowing that there's so many more children that we're not able to reach, and then we participate in a sting like this one and get to see the predators taken off the streets. These are predators who preyed upon me as a child. They preyed upon Dr. Marianne Thomas, our director of anti-trafficking, and our anti-trafficking team can tell you they are working with over 100 active cases of teenagers and young adults who are being preyed upon by predators just like them. We have to have stings like this. We're so grateful to Polk County Sheriff's Office, grateful to Grady Judd, and grateful to the different agencies when we get to be out there participating side by side with them. We get to see the heart of this community, and the heart of this community is that each of the teenagers and adults that are caught up, some because of survival sex, some because they're currently being trafficked for sex, each of them, though, like Grady Judd said, have suffered. Each of them have suffered, and each of them need an opportunity to know about services that can provide healing, opportunities for a way out. And, you know, as a survivor who my journey began in jail, I don't know other ways that you will reach us to this magnitude, other ways that you will get the predators off the streets, and at the same time invite organizations like One More Child to sit there through the whole process and get to walk beside the women. We walk beside them for years. The teenagers, we will serve them until they're 24 years old. Beyond that, we will make sure they're plugged into the community and receiving services. We look at the board and those Johns and do know that some of them have no idea who they're buying sex from. And, you know, we wish they could hear that if you sit in the room, in the booking room of a sting with the women, the ones who are immediately grateful that this is happening because the violence against them is stopping, and the ones who are not grateful, who aren't ready for it to stop, we still look at that and understand that the violence against them is going to be stopping for tonight. They're going to hear about services. And when I look at it as a child of a trafficking victim and a trafficking victim myself, their children's children will benefit from the sting. They will know that help exists, and we will get more of the Johns to stop benefiting off of the suffering of children and adults. We will get more predators to not be able to anymore prey upon us. And again, just so grateful for Polk County Sheriff's Office and all the agencies, grateful for the sting. And as a community, we ask for your support, truly, to collaborate with us as we collaborate with law enforcement, that it needs to be a community collaboration where we stop the suffering of violence against our women and children, whether sexual exploitation or trafficking. Again, thank you.
What's important to recognize here is that every one of these ladies not only had an interaction that night, but these anti-human trafficking organizations will continue to follow up with them, will continue to interact with them. In fact, one of the ladies that absolutely shut them down the night of the event has since emailed them and said, I want to talk, I need help. So we'll never give up on them. And that's our promise. But the reality of it is, and I get fired up when people go, start in with all this mush mouth talk, okay? How else do we find these ladies? We can't run an advertisement in your newspaper or on television and think they're going to show up. But the criminal justice system has the opportunity to say, look, now we've got you in the criminal justice system, but we're going to offer you a way out. We're going to offer you a way out without any record. We're going to offer you a way out with services, with support, and with help. But if we don't throw this large net over the water, then we don't catch them. Now, you can write this down, record this. There'll be another one. There will be another sting. We'll put more people in jail, and they'll be looking at Krista and Dr. Thomas here, because we're going to lock you up if you come to this county to violate the law and take advantage of these young ladies.
I have one more thing to say that I so wanted to make sure to let not just you, Grady Judd, but all of you who have participated on the law enforcement side know. The very next morning after one of the nights, we got to sit with a very young adult who'd been trafficked for many years. And as I was talking to her, you know, she's sharing it was all scary and it was upsetting, but she was already saying she was so grateful to be sitting here. And I said, I hear that, but are you grateful for last night? And she said, I am so grateful for last night. She said, had you been able to show me that there were services anywhere else, like had I met you randomly or seen a sign saying there was help for me as a trafficking victim, I would have been too afraid to even look at that sign or talk to you. But because of the sting, because of it being in the safety of law enforcement all around, she was able to talk to us and share that she does want help. She was able to hear and feel safe enough to have that conversation and to hear that from her own words the very next morning, that she wanted us to tell the law enforcement and Polk County Sheriff's Office, thank you. Thank you for being willing to do whatever it takes to let her have a chance for healing in a new life.
And as a wrap-up, without my chiefs, who I call them my chiefs, they're my buddies. We grew up in this business together. They're professionals. Without their help and their resources, this would not be possible. We couldn't do this by ourselves, nor would we want to. So I'm grateful, chiefs, for all of you. And at the end of the day, we're going to do everything we can. One more child. If we only successfully rescue one, it'll be a great operation. But as Chief Garcia said, when that first child predator walked through the door, that everything else is a bonus. Questions?
Sheriff, just to clarify, just to go on the right, what's the difference between the people whose mother was held and versus the human trafficking victim? Is it just that they requested services?
It's that they requested services, or there was an overwhelming there was an overwhelming opinion by our service providers that these folks would be willing to receive services and met every one of the criteria that they were currently victims of human trafficking. That doesn't mean the others won't be followed up. Everyone will continue to receive follow-up. But some of them looked us right in the face and said, this is my job, this is my business, I don't care whether you like it or not. To them we said, well, we're not going to give up on you, but it is against the law. And that's the bottom line to it. It is against the law. And quite frankly, the Johns, the Florida legislature, in their brilliance, set up the ability to fine each of these Johns for $5,000 for each event. So I want to ask the judges not to waive that $5,000. I want every one of those rascals to donate $5,000 for what they did to the court system, and then we can work toward getting that money back into these service providers to help the other folks. Any other questions?
How many of them, or were there any that were child victims?
Yeah, so we get to have, you know, a couple hours often while the process is happening, talking to almost all of them at some point want to engage at least a little bit, and I would say over half we get to really have some conversations with. In that, we do not meet any who don't have some form of childhood trauma. I think that's just so important to help understand this epidemic of sexual exploitation, is that even the ones like Sheriff said are saying, I want to be here, this is, you know, my choice. When we talk to them and they do share some of their stories, it always begins with violence against them in some form, and most often sexual violence against them as children. You know, we rarely meet one who will say there was no sexual violence at all as a child. They do exist. There are adults in sex work who will say they have no violence against them. It is really rare that we meet one, and I think that just helps paint a picture that you know, once you've been victimized as a child in the developmental years, especially sexually, but any type of violence, your life changes. And, you know, what we can say are choices and opportunities for healthy adults are removed from us. Our ability to get an education is removed. Our ability to have healthy relationships is stunted. From that point on, by the time they're in adult sex work without a trafficker, which some are today, it has been a long journey of choices in life being taken from them, a long journey of suffering. And, you know, we just want to see the cycles stopped for their children. We want to see the generational trafficking and trauma against, you know, men and women, but especially through these stings against the women. We want to see it stop.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Have a good day. We appreciate you being here.
Do you mind just commenting on the house fire that investigation?
At about midnight, there was a house fire on Willis Road in a suburb of Mulberry, and an 80-year-old lady and her 86-year-old husband succumbed to that fire. The fire is being investigated by the State Fire Marshal Service. Our homicide team is working the death investigation. At this early stage, and I put that in quotes, at this early stage, it does not appear to be anything other than maybe an electrical or you know, just a normal house mishap. However, there's lots of work to do, lots of crime analysis to do, so we certainly are not jumping to that conclusion, but there's nothing that we see as far as a red flag in the beginning of the investigation to lead us to believe anything other than a terrible, horrible, unfortunate event in just the shadow of Christmas time. So it breaks our heart. I applaud the fire service members that rushed into that house in order to try to save them. Both of them were brought from the house, rushed to the hospital, and pronounced deceased at, I believe, Bartow. So it's a horrible event. The investigation is underway. There will be one by us, one by the fire, an investigation by us, an investigation by fire services, certainly the medical examiner. But at this point in time, we don't see any nefarious conduct. Of course, all of that's subject to change because we're, what, 8 or 9 hours, 10 hours after the event. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. It was very good to meet you.
If y'all want to hang out, we'll grab this thing and get some pictures with
Oh, okay.
in the hallway.
Can we bring our team for some pictures? Thank you.
Scott. Pictures here in a minute.